Morbid Facts, Part 246. When filming for The Grinch, the thick makeup and prosthetics made Jim Carrey feel like he was buried alive each day. The physical restraints became so brutal for him that they had to hire a former CIA agent to teach him techniques for coping with torture. You're 10 times more likely to be bitten by a person in New York City than you are to be bitten by a shark at any beach in the world. In 1984, Louisiana karate instructor Jeffrey Doucette was caught molesting an 11-year-old male student in a motel room. A few weeks later, the boy's father disguised himself and waited for Doucette to walk by with police before shooting him in the head. The murder was caught live on camera by local news, but the protective father received no prison time for his act. Morbid Facts, Part 247. In 1961, 5-year-old Nancy Brewster got a lump on her neck and was eventually too sick to go to school. So her deeply religious family brought her to a Christian practitioner who simply prayed for her and said that her illness was an illusion. When she died horribly 2 years later, there was no funeral and the family never spoke of her again. If you ever have to sneeze, just let it rip. In 2018, a British man blew a hole in his throat by holding his nose and mouth shut while sneezing. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks and lucky to be alive. Alexander Litvinenko was a former Russian spy who heavily criticized Vladimir Putin. In 2006, he was quickly rushed to the hospital after being poisoned with a cup of tea in a London hotel. Working with Scottish detectives as he lay dying, he was able to trace the lethal substance to one of his former comrades in the Russian Secret Service, thus solving his own murder case. Morbid Facts, Part 248. In the 1950s, LA businessman Richard Poncher purchased the crypt above Marilyn Monroe's. As a final wish, he asked his wife to bury him face down so that he could spend all of eternity on top of Marilyn Monroe. The deadliest air attack in human history happened a few months before Hiroshima. In March of 1945, the U.S. Air Force painted a giant flaming X over the heart of Tokyo using napalm strikes. At least 100,000 Japanese civilians were killed within a span of 3 hours. There's a section of Yellowstone where you could get away with murder due to a loophole in the U.S. Constitution. The Zone of Death is a 50-square-mile piece of Idaho that's completely uninhabited. This means if you commit a crime within this zone, there could be no jury since no one lives there, and therefore no trial for the crime. Morbid Facts, Part 249. The time machine in Back to the Future was originally supposed to be a refrigerator, but the director was afraid that kids would imitate the movie and become trapped in fridges and die, which had been an epidemic in the decades prior. So instead, they went with the DeLorean. U.S. law requires that eggs sold in grocery stores must be washed. European law requires that eggs sold in grocery stores must not be washed. Both laws are to prevent salmonella. In 2001, German technician Armin Maiwes placed an online ad looking for someone who volunteered to be cannibalized. The offer was accepted by engineer Bernd Brandis, who claimed that he was aroused by the idea of being eaten. After eating Brandis and eventually going to jail, Maiwes became a vegetarian. But he claims that there are at least 800 active cannibals living throughout Germany. Morbid Facts, Part 250. Rock legend Dave Grohl has tried to live as frugally as possible after watching his mother suffer a stroke while filing her taxes. Famous philosopher Kurt Gödel had an obsessive fear of being poisoned, so he only ate food cooked by his wife. When his wife went to the hospital for an extended stay, Gödel stopped eating completely and promptly starved to death. If you're ever dared to swim in a tank that looks like this, say no. Aeration tanks have a much lower density than water and therefore very little buoyancy. This means if you fall into one, you will certainly drown. Ashley Martinson was abused by several of her mother's boyfriends throughout her childhood. The day after her 17th birthday, she killed her stepfather with a shotgun before stabbing her mother 30 times to death. She was sentenced to 23 years in prison, but says she feels safer and happier now than she ever did at home. Morbid Facts, Part 251. This is why you should always make sure you're in the right Uber. In 2019, 21-year-old Samantha Josephson hopped into the Uber she ordered after a night at the bar. However, she quickly realized she'd entered the wrong vehicle, but the driver locked the windows and had childproof locks on the doors. He then proceeded to stab her more than 100 times with a double-bladed knife. Josephson lost so much blood that there was only 1 tablespoon left in her entire body when it was found. 24-year-old Nathaniel Rowland was later sentenced to life behind bars for the horrific murder. Since 2004, at least 18 people have died from rabies after receiving organ transplants from infected donors. Transplanted organs are typically not screened for rabies, which can incubate for more than a year before any symptoms show, at which point it's 100% fatal. Morbid Facts, Part 253. Former Japanese pro wrestler Hayabusa is considered to be a pioneer of high flying in the sport. But in 2001, his career ended abruptly after a botched backflip left him paralyzed from the neck down. 15 years later, he finally regained use of his limbs and was able to walk again until he tragically died from a stroke the next year. In 1974, there were likely over 100 active serial killers throughout the US, including Ted Bundy, Dennis Rader, and John Wayne Gacy. The Code of Hammurabi decreed that bartenders who watered down beer would be executed. Legendary children's author Roald Dahl was surrounded by his family when he died. His last words were about to be, "You know, I'm not frightened, it's just that I will miss you all so much." But right before he was about to die, a nurse pricked him with a needle of morphine and Dahl muttered his actual last words, "Ow, fuck." Morbid Facts, Part 254. While filming Night at the Museum 3, Robin Williams struggled with panic attacks and often had trouble remembering even one line. His autopsy later revealed that he'd been suffering from a severe form of dementia and lost more than 40% of the dopamine neurons in his brain. Twice convicted murderer Thomas Grasso was executed by lethal injection in 1995. His last words were, "Please tell the media I did not get my SpaghettiOs, I got spaghetti. I want the press to know this." After being arrested for joyriding in a stolen police car, Shane Goldsby got his sister's rapist as a cellmate in 2020. But despite repeatedly asking for a transfer, no action was taken. After the man taunted him for days with specific details about the assault, Goldsby snapped and stomped the man to death. Goldsby later pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and had 25 years added to his sentence. Morbid Facts, Part 257. In 1957, a stray dog named Laika became the first animal to ever orbit the Earth when she was the occupant of the Soviet spacecraft Sputnik 2. The dog was originally reported to have died painlessly in orbit about 1 week after takeoff. But nearly 50 years later, it was revealed that she likely died from panic and overheating just a few hours into the mission. There's a version of the tortoise and the hare where all the animals die in a forest fire. This was because the tortoise was given the job of warning everyone after winning the race and therefore being deemed the fastest. Hajime Fuji volunteered to be a kamikaze pilot but was denied because he had a wife and 2 kids. To honor his wish, his wife drowned their 2 young girls before taking her own life the same way. Hajime then achieved his dream of flying as a kamikaze, meeting his death in May of 1945. Morbid Facts, Part 259. This 1998 photo was taken in Omagh, Ireland, just minutes before a bomb placed in the red car exploded. 29 people were killed by the blast and another 220 were injured. The cameraman of the photo died, but the man shown with his daughter happened to survive. A healthy human heart can only beat for about 1 minute when removed from the body, but the heart of a coke user can beat for up to 25 minutes outside of the body. In 2011, a 17-year-old boy jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge to impress his friends. The jump has a 98% death rate, but the boy survived with only minor bruising. In 1980, 7-year-old Anna Bachmeyer was sexually assaulted before being strangled to death by her 35-year-old neighbor. During the trial, Anna's mother opened fire in a crowded courtroom and murdered the man. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison but was released after 3. Morbid Facts, Part 261. When Harambe was just 2 years old, his mother, brother, and 2 half-siblings were all killed in a tragic accident. At a zoo in Texas, a tub of chlorine tablets was left too close to a heater, which filled their enclosure with toxic gas and poisoned them to death. Mississippi didn't make it illegal to sell a child until 2009. When a woman tried to sell her 2-week-old grandson on Craigslist for $2,000 in a car, but she couldn't be prosecuted because there wasn't currently a law to punish her under. DJ Khaled used to go by the name Arab Attack but decided to change it after 9/11. In 1960, the CIA recruited one of Fidel Castro's mistresses to murder him with poison pills, but Castro found out. Castro then handed her his gun and dared her to shoot him, but she put the gun down and they had sex instead. Morbid Facts, Part 263. Queen Elizabeth had two first cousins named Nerissa and Catherine Lyon who were severely disabled. Nerissa was publicly pronounced dead in 1940, while her sister Catherine was said to have died in 1961. But it was later revealed that they were actually tucked away in a mental asylum without any visits from the royal family until their actual deaths in 1986 and 2014. The US military buys a prank fart spray called liquid ass to train and prepare medics for the stench of the battlefield. This is a 1969 photo of Roman Polanski kneeling next to the door where the word pig is written in his wife Sharon Tate's blood. While Polanski was working on a film in Europe, Tate was stabbed 16 times by members of the Manson family when she was 8.5 months pregnant. Polanski has said that the murders changed him forever and that not being there is his greatest life regret. Morbid Facts, Part 264. In 1997, episode 38 of the Pokemon anime aired just one time before being pulled from TV forever. The episode featured a flashing strobe effect that sent nearly 700 children to the hospital due to dizziness, nausea, and seizures. The incident nearly single-handedly ruined the franchise, and the Pokemon Porygon was banned from ever appearing in an episode again. P.T. Barnum began his career as a showman after purchasing a blind slave woman named Joyce Heth. Barnum claimed she was over 160 years old and had been the nanny of George Washington. He exhibited her until her death in 1836 and even charged people 50 cents to watch her autopsy. Syrian archaeologist Khaled al-Assad dedicated his life to the excavation of the ancient city of Palmyra. In 2015, he was tortured and later beheaded by ISIS after refusing to give up the location of precious artifacts. Morbid Facts, Part 265. This was the last photo taken of Marie Joseph before she drowned in the swimming pool shown. Due to the cloudy water, her body wasn't found for 2 days, during which time people continued swimming in the pool, unaware that Marie's body was decomposing beneath them. In 2011, scientists conducted an experiment to find out what's inside the average human belly button. One individual who hadn't bathed in years hosted 2 species of bacteria that are typically only found in ice caps and thermal vents. In the year 2000, an orca whale killed a great white shark off the coast of California. According to satellite tags, the smell of the dead shark's carcass apparently caused all nearby great whites to suddenly vanish. One shark that was in the region immediately dove down 500 meters and swam straight to Hawaii without stopping. Morbid Facts, Part 266. Alan Lee Davis was convicted of 3 counts of murder after killing a pregnant woman and her 2 daughters in 1982. When he was executed in 1999, it took 3 runs of the electric chair to kill him. Due to the botched execution, he remains the last person to be executed by electric chair in the state of Florida. This 1985 photo was taken on board Japanese Airlines Flight 123 just minutes before the plane crashed into a mountainside. There were 520 fatalities, including everyone shown in this photo. In 2017, Las Vegas police arrested Shane Schindler, the prime suspect in the sledgehammer murders of 2 homeless men. Police set up a sting in which they disguised a mannequin as a homeless man and left it on the street. This is a photo of Schindler bashing the mannequin with the sledgehammer, thus proving he was the killer. Morbid Facts, Part 267. In 2001, Ashton Kutcher had a girlfriend who was murdered by a serial killer after being stabbed 35 times in her own home. Kutcher would end up testifying in the trial of the Hollywood Ripper, who would later confess to murdering at least 10 women over a 15-year span. Author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, lost her virginity on top of her mother's grave. She also kept her dead husband's heart and carried it around for 30 years until her own death. According to the FBI, if you're murdered in the United States, there's only about a 40% chance that your killer will be found and punished. In 2009, a Russian man went to the doctor suspecting that there was something wrong with his lungs. Initially, doctors thought they were dealing with a tumor, but it ended up being something they'd never seen before. It turned out that years ago, the man accidentally inhaled the seed of a fir tree and it started growing inside of him. Morbid Facts, Part 268. In 2013, 16-year-old Ethan Couch killed 4 people while drunk driving. But he initially wasn't sentenced to any jail time since his attorney argued that he suffered from affluenza, a mental illness caused by growing up with too much money. In ancient Sparta, only 2 groups of people could have their names inscribed on their tombstones: men who died in battle and women who died in childbirth. In 1994, Los Angeles police arrested a man dressed as the Grim Reaper carrying a scythe. He was reported by various nursing homes after staring through patients' windows while wearing the costume. In the year 2000, the charred remains of Mary Lou Morris were found in her burned-out car in Houston, Texas. Only 4 days later, the body of Mary McGinnis Morris was found in her burned-out car in Houston, Texas. Police believe that a hitman killed the wrong Mary Morris and tried to fix it. Morbid Facts, Part 269. Ever since they were little kids, twins June and Jennifer Gibbons refused to speak to anyone other than each other. By the time they turned 18, they'd committed multiple criminal offenses and were sent to a high-security mental hospital in 1981. Years prior, they made a long-standing agreement that if one of them ever died, the other must begin to speak and attempt to live a normal life. While at the mental hospital, they decided it was now necessary for one of them to die, and Jennifer agreed to make the sacrifice. In March of 1993, Jennifer was rushed to the hospital where she died of a sudden inflammation of the heart. There was no evidence of drugs or poisoning in her system. It was as if she'd just died out of nowhere. Afterwards, June said she was finally liberated from her sister and was eventually released from the asylum. She now talks to people and has lived a relatively normal life ever since. Morbid Facts, Part 271. If your skin ever starts turning yellow like the photo on the left, you should see a doctor as soon as possible. This man had a condition called jaundice, which can indicate serious problems with the liver. These photos were taken before and after the man received a liver transplant. Before the murder of Shinzo Abe, the most recent political assassination in Japan happened in 1960. Leader of the Socialist Party, Inajiro Asanuma, was attacked by a 17-year-old wielding a sword. The brutal murder was captured live on television and broadcasted to millions across Japan. A group of researchers in Africa once hid a speaker near a herd of elephants and played a recording of one of their herd members who had died. The dead elephant's family suddenly went wild calling for him, and his daughter cried out for days afterward. The researchers later vowed to never conduct such an inhumane experiment again. Morbid Facts, Part 272. This photo shows The Undertaker looking down at medical staff after chokeslamming Mick Foley through the roof of Hell in a Cell. The fall was completely unplanned and left Foley with multiple dislocations, bruised ribs, and internal bleeding. The Undertaker was certain he'd just killed the man, but Foley got up and even finished the match. The band Fleetwood Mac highly considered thanking their drug dealer in the credits of their most popular album, Rumors. They only decided against it after their dealer was murdered. In 2010, a commercial plane crash in Africa killed everyone on board except for one passenger, who was left with an insane story to tell his rescuers. Apparently, a man smuggled a crocodile on board, which managed to escape shortly before landing. This made everyone panic and run to one side of the plane at one time, causing it to flip and eventually crash. Morbid Facts, Part 274. Stricken with polio in 1952, Paul Alexander has been living in an iron lung for 70 years. He may be the only person left in one, since modern technology has created far more practical methods for respiration. But if Paul leaves this machine for even a few minutes, he will stop breathing and almost certainly die. 6 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the sunken battleship USS West Virginia was finally salvaged from the ocean floor. On that ship, a calendar was found inside of an airtight room where 3 sailors had marked off 16 days until they died. In 2013, a French man on a business trip died of a heart attack while having sex with a stranger. A French court later ruled that it was a workplace accident and that his wife and family were entitled to compensation. Many say he did it for his family. Morbid Facts, Part 275. In 2018, 17-year-old Jordan Turpin called 911 to report that she and her 12 siblings were being abused by their parents. This is sadly rather common, but what police discovered in the Turpin household was far more horrific than anything they'd seen before. The entire house reeked of human excrement, decaying garbage, and dead pets that were scattered throughout the home. Many of the 12 children had been tied to their beds and were covered in bruises and dirt. It was clear that David and Louise Turpin had been torturing their children for years, allowing them to eat just once per day and shower just once per year. They would reportedly often leave food on the table and force their children to stare at it before throwing it away in the trash. This resulted in extreme malnourishment, as their oldest son was 29 years old but weighed just 82 pounds at the time of their rescue. The kids were so clearly abused that a few doctors broke down in tears upon seeing them for the first time. The Turpin parents were handed 12 counts of torture among numerous other charges and were effectively sentenced to life in prison. Morbid Facts, Part 276. While filming for Rocky IV, Sylvester Stallone challenged Dolph Lundgren to try to knock him out for real. Lundgren hit him so hard that he was sent to the ICU for 9 days and was lucky to survive. The Cordoba fighting dog was a dog breed that became so aggressive that it was very difficult to breed them, since a pair would often fight to the death rather than mate. This eventually contributed to their extinction before the 20th century. This photo from 1960 shows segregationists harassing 6-year-old Ruby Bridges, the first black child to attend an all-white school. They portrayed her as a doll laying in a coffin to protest her attendance at the school. Chester the Molester was a comic strip by Dwayne Tinsley that featured a pedophile named Chester who was interested in molesting young girls. After producing the comic strip for 13 years, Tinsley was convicted of molesting his teenage daughter Allison over a 5-year span. Morbid Facts, Part 277. Former WWE wrestler Chris Benoit is considered to be one of the most talented professional wrestlers of all time. But sadly, his career was tainted when the 40-year-old murdered his wife and son before taking his own life in 2007. After multiple tests were conducted, it was revealed that his brain was so damaged from wrestling that he had the brain of an 85-year-old with an advanced form of dementia, likely contributing to his horrific behavior. In 2012, a UK surgeon was fired and convicted of assault after branding his initials into the livers of 2 of his patients. It was only discovered when another surgeon had to perform a corrective surgery on one of the patients. In 2013, Florida man Jeff Bush was sleeping in his bedroom when a sinkhole opened up beneath him and swallowed him whole. His brother heard his screams from across the house and immediately ran over to start digging, but Jeff's body was never recovered. Morbid Facts, Part 278. Frank Lentini was a circus performer in the early 1900s who was born with a parasitic twin. This resulted in him having 3 legs, 4 feet, 16 toes, and yes, 2 sets of functioning genitals. He married, had 4 kids, and lived to the age of 78. Here's a clip of Admiral Jeremiah Denton blinking the word torture in Morse code while he was held captive in the Vietnam War. He was being filmed for Vietnamese propaganda, but US naval intelligence was able to decipher his message. In 1979, gold miners in Alaska stumbled upon this perfectly preserved steppe bison that's right around 50,000 years old. It was so incredibly intact that researchers decided to take a chunk of muscle from its neck and cook it into a meal. It was described as tough like beef jerky, but quite delicious aside from the muddy aftertaste. Morbid Facts, Part 279. Paul McCartney decided not to tell his wife Linda that her cancer progressed and had become terminal. He didn't think it would do her any good if she knew, so she continued riding her horse until the day before she died. These were just some of the wedding rings that were taken from victims of Buchenwald concentration camp during the Holocaust. It's estimated that around 100,000 Japanese people vanish without a trace every year. Many of these cases are people simply trying to save their honor after a divorce, job loss, or a failed exam. After the 1947 murder of Elizabeth Short, aka Black Dahlia, reporters told her mother that Elizabeth had just taken first place in a beauty contest. Once they had enough information from her for their story, they informed Mrs. Short that her daughter had actually been viciously murdered. Morbid Facts, Part 280. This one made me puke. A female orangutan named Pony was used as a sex slave in a village on the Asian island of Borneo. She was shaved and chained to a bed daily, and whenever a man approached her, she would automatically assume a submissive position. In 1965, a device was patented to deliver a baby using centrifugal force. The machine would spin around until the baby popped out, which would then be caught in a net. An armadillo's armor is so tough that a Texas man once shot at one on his property and the bullet ricocheted back, hitting the man in the face. In 1951, New Zealand author Janet Frame was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was scheduled for a lobotomy. But just days before the operation, she won New Zealand's most prestigious literary award, prompting doctors to cancel the operation that would mash her brain. Morbid Facts, Part 281. There's a blue whale that sings at such high frequencies that he's unable to communicate with other whales. Nicknamed 52 Blue, his calls have been heard since the 1980s but never receive a response. Waist chopping was a popular execution method in ancient China that involved sawing the body clean in half. But it was banned in 1734 after a Chinese official was cut in half and still managed to write the Chinese word for awful 7 times in his own blood. In 2005, one sheep decided to jump off a cliff, causing 1,500 others to follow. But only the first 450 actually died, since the rest of the falls were cushioned by the dead bodies below. The Great Whiskey Fire of Dublin killed 13 people in 1875, but none of them died from the actual fire. They were all killed by alcohol poisoning after drinking too much of the whiskey pouring through the streets. Morbid Facts, Part 282. When former NFL safety Dave Dworson took his own life in 2011, he left a note that read, "Please see that my brain is given to the NFL's brain bank." He shot himself in the chest so that his brain would be preserved, and doctors confirmed he was suffering from severe CTE. In 2007, children going to see The Last Mimsy at a movie theater in Florida were accidentally shown The Hills Have Eyes 2 instead, the opening scene of which features a chained naked woman giving birth to a deformed baby. The theater apologized for the trauma and gave all the parents free tickets. In 1971, a Texas state representative introduced a bill that honored a serial killer for his work in population control. He did this simply to prove that most of his colleagues passed bills without even reading them. And he was correct, since it was passed unanimously. Morbid Facts, Part 284. In 1959, a white man named John Howard Griffin disguised himself as a black man and traveled through the Deep South for 6 weeks. After writing a book about his experiences with racism, he was forced to move to Mexico for several years due to the barrage of death threats. Albert Einstein died at the age of 76 after refusing to undergo surgery on his heart. He was quoted saying, "I want to go when I want. It is tasteless to prolong life artificially. I have done my share, it's time to go. I will do so elegantly." In September of 1974, 18-year-old Milika Kostic was lured to a 12th floor apartment by 5 men who attempted to assault her. When given the chance, she decided to jump from the apartment window and fell about 120 feet onto a cafe awning below. She died 2 days later, but was conscious for long enough to give police a full description of the awful incident. Morbid Facts, Part 285. This pic shows Thomas Whitaker on the right celebrating his college graduation with his mom Patricia and brother Kevin. But in reality, Thomas flunked out of school and devised a plan so that his family would never find out. When they returned home the same night this photo was taken, a gunman hired by Thomas ambushed the family, killing Kevin and Patricia and wounding the father Ken. Thomas was initially sentenced to death for the 2 murders, but in 2018 he was spared just 40 minutes before his execution. Turns out his father forgave him and requested for his only remaining family member to not be executed. In 1991, Nigerian prophet Daniel Abadunrin apparently wanted to recreate the story of Daniel in the Bible, so he broke into a lion cage at the zoo with the belief that God wouldn't allow them to open their mouths. But as soon as the lions saw Daniel, they tore him to shreds.